Good morning. So I got up at 4 a.m. so excited to do one thing, film this video for you, because I know there's gonna be some of you who are on the edge of your seat, glued watching this, screaming, holy he's talking about me, like that's my problem. I didn't know it was called that. The concept is toxic shame. Like that production? So now you might be wondering, well, what is this chart, this ominous blue man here that I may or may not have spent 20 minutes coloring in for you? The blue represents your public self. This could also be called your persona. So in an interaction, if you alter yourself to be more likable, or you withhold opinions, or you're interacting with the world, that's a front-facing self. That is often your public self. But inside there's a private self. This dissonance between public and private, that's where the shame creeps in. And then we internalize and say, man, if they really knew me, they would not accept me. They would reject me too. That's what shame is. That I am so bad inside, I have to hide myself. I can't accept myself. And if people really saw what's going on behind the scenes when I clock out of work, they'd be like, I can't believe we're trusting that guy to make decisions. And so this is why vulnerability is such a breath of fresh air in today's age, because we all have a public self. Instagram, we all have a persona we're upholding. Social media. So I want to continue talking about this and share some personal stories from my life, if that's okay. I want to give you 3 signs how this really screws you up. Sign number 1 that you're struggling with toxic shame and how it messes us up is you feel like you have to present a false self. When I met my girlfriend, I was like, holy cow, she's the most beautiful woman I've ever met. How do I say this? I was going through a cringe Instagram phase, like trying to be not necessarily like an influencer lifestyle, but I would take photos in like these weird places, be on tour in a band and post cringy behind the scenes videos. It pushed her away to the point of where we sat down at tacos. I think it was like our 3rd date. And she said, I don't know if this is gonna work out. And if it is gonna work out, I feel like you're not being real. Like I need the real you. Because I see glimpses of it and I like that better than this cringy Instagram thing you got going on. And in that moment, we dropped all the fronts and we've never dated from them since. And it's so ironic because we think that that's the most desirable part of us. We're like, oh, we can just act a certain way and then we'll get all the validation or attention or love or whatever. But again, the irony is that pushes people away because they never get a chance to see the real you. So they're dating, if they buy into it at all, they're dating from a place of persona. And I find this extremely common with men today. You know, there's the whole like red pill movement where I think it's great that men have self-improvement that's just for them because they need different advice than women. We just operate in a different way through the world. But it goes too far to where now you have to alter yourself and develop this like masculine frame where she can never see weakness. And if you're playing into a role so much that it alters who you are, you're buying into a false self, a shame-bound identity. Now you're always worried, oh, they're gonna find me out. And if they find me out, this whole house of cards crumbles down because I'm not that person on the inside. Masculine alpha male outside, scared inner child boy on the inside. But this also goes into interpersonal relationships. So I'll give you another brief story. I had this family friend growing up who every time we hung out, she would hog the mic and you could see people kind of like tune out when she started talking because she talked all the time. I'm not kidding, like every single thing was this long run-on story, so much energy, just like over the top. It was extremely hard to be around. And one day I asked her boyfriend, I'm like, hey, is she always like this? And he's like, no, she listens to podcasts and they all have that like crazy over the top energy. And I think she's trying to mimic it in social situations. And it was so sad because there were times where she was too tired to do that. And she was actually extremely likable. And I'm like, dude, that's the version we want to hang out with. Like, what is this like crazy over the top performance you're doing here? Like, chill it out. Most people label themselves introverts because they're interacting wrong. And if interactions are leaving you constantly tired, there's a 9 out of 10 chance it's because it's this persona. Because I know if you're someone who labels as an introvert, there's people in your life where you pick up the phone, talk to your mom, and you're just yourself because she actually knows who you are at the core. You don't have to uphold a persona. You're not worried about getting found out or judged. And that conversation, you walk away leaving energized. Or maybe it's a close friend. That's the kind of interaction we're talking about there. It's scarier to be yourself because if people reject that, then they're really rejecting you. But if people reject the persona, it doesn't hurt as much because, yeah, that's not really me. I wasn't really trying. I'm not going to give my best effort because if I give my best effort and fail, then damn, that rejection hurts. The problem is that if you get success from your persona, it's never going to feel as good. You're always going to doubt it and question it because you're like, was that even me? Maybe they don't like the real me. And this cycle gets deeper and spins faster. Is this making sense? Sign number 2, you're struggling with toxic shame. This one, escaping to fantasy. You ever see that movie, Walter Mitty? I remember seeing that in college when it came out, and I bought a solo ticket and I went on Christmas Eve opening because the previews had such good music. And it was these beautiful drone shots of Ben Stiller in Iceland on a longboard. So the story, if you don't know it, he's working this average job and it's so mind-numbingly boring that he zones out all the time. And so Ben Stiller has all these grand visions of traveling, of proving, he replays conversations, of telling someone off. He has all these fantasies in his head. And someone flicks a paperclip at him and he snaps out of it and then he's back in his boring world. We all do that to an extent. If you're constantly escaping to a fantasy world where it's more exciting, then that's a sign of shame because when you escape to a fantasy world, you can control what happens. You can make yourself who you want to be. You can replay the conversation in the shower and, tell them off. But then the movie goes, Walter eventually gets fired and then he goes and lives those adventures in real life. And if you're like, well, I don't really daydream that much or escape to fantasy, escapism in general, I think is a better sign here that we're in toxic shame. So escapism is withdrawing and self-isolating. And this comes in the form of addictions a lot of times. So video games for 8 to 12 hours a day, because that's safe, you can control it. You're leveling up a character instead of going through challenges in your real life. Escaping to pornography as a source of validation. This is an area that has a ton of shame around it. No one walks away from watching porn feeling like, man, I'm ready to take on the world. Bring it on. Like, I can't wait to socialize. No, it's a dark, private, shameful thing that causes you to feel worse about yourself. And then you're like, oh, I'm never doing that again. That's disgusting. And then you find yourself doing it a day, 2, 3 days later. So it's a cycle between disgust and giving in. And that tension creates a lot of shame that affects your whole life. Escapism can also be what is labeled as positive. The classic example would be the business owner who escapes to his business to avoid interpersonal conflict with his wife and his kids at home. Someone who's obsessed with traveling, adventure. Nothing wrong with that, again. But if you're escaping from your life back home, and that's the only time you feel like you're really living, a better solution would be to build a life back home that you don't feel like you need to escape from. So this process of escaping to fantasy keeps the shame cycle going, because who you are in private, whether it's addictions, whether it's escaping, whether it's not feeling good enough or having a fantasy, doesn't match who you are in public. The shame cycle repeats and it only breaks once you do this. But we have one more. And this one, it might just be the biggest one here. Self-isolation. Self-isolation, cutting yourself off from everyone and everything and spending a lot of time alone. Now I have a personal story on this one. When I was a kid, I had a lot of chaos going on at home, and I was always acting up, getting in trouble. I had ADHD that was so bad, my 6th period class was in the principal's office, and I even got uninvited to our graduation. They're like, Clark is just too much. That's what I got told my whole life. I'm being too much. I internalized a lot of that, and I would walk home every day 5 miles, and I would get this baguette from a Safeway. I would get a 2-liter of Diet Coke. I was really living, and I would eat the middle out of the baguette because I didn't like the crust, and I would drink the whole 2 liter of Diet Coke. That was my way of rebelling at like 11 years old. I would play drums nonstop because that was alone and I could connect through music. And those patterns stemmed into college and high school, and all of that was the only time I felt like I could accept myself or that anyone got me was when I was listening to music or when I was isolating myself. The problem with that is pretty obvious. You're alone. And human beings aren't meant to be alone. You know, there's all these studies coming out that isolation in the world that we're in can reduce your life expectancy majorly. We're social creatures that need to be in community. And when you're in community, you get a lot of mirrors of who you are. Because sometimes, here's a sinister thing, sometimes who we think we are isn't actually who we are. And the only way you're going to know that is reflected back to you in the mirrors of others. That's why relationships are so great, is because you grow with that person and they reflect back to you constantly, daily, sometimes way more than you'd like, right? Who you actually are or where you need to grow. Self-awareness can be very tough to do if you're just in isolation. And so with self-improvement, I see videos that make me really sad where the advice is shut the world out. You know, just you and your goal, no one else, prove them wrong. And what is that? Is that a place of healthy self-acceptance and love? That's a place of saying who I am isn't good enough, so I'll prove them wrong. And so one thing later on in life that I did that really opened the floodgates was sobriety. So I'm almost 1,000 days sober from alcohol. I know I say it every video, but I'm not gonna stop. And what I noticed when I would drink is that was a form of self-isolation. Because it started out like I would go hang out with friends, we'd have a few beers, we'd watch a football game, you know, alcohol's everywhere, I'd be on tour, I'm drinking with other people. And then when all that shut down, I started drinking alone every single night. And I would drink and I would change my state. And the state I would get into was this euphoria, high dopamine, accepting myself, a lightness. And when I stopped, I felt like that superpower got taken away and I was just bored. Drinking was really exciting. It would make mundane, boring things extremely exciting. You can talk to people for 3 hours that you have nothing in common with if you're drunk. Life can be very banal when all that's taken away. And so when I stopped drinking, I had to confront the belief, why do I feel like I have to crank it up? Why do I feel like I have to be the life of the party? Why do I feel like I have to escape my current state all the time? That being bored isn't okay. That being with who I am isn't okay. And so when I got sober, I got extremely bored. And that was the thing I had no clue was going to be the hardest part of it. It's not the willpower, it's not the taste, it's not even the feeling, it's the boredom. But in that lies a kernel of self-growth. Because the real question is, what am I trying to escape from? Why do I feel like it's not okay to be who I am on the inside? You take that question, you journal on it, and you realize a lot of things of what you're doing is to uphold a persona and image and to escape who you are on the inside. Is this useful so far? Is this enlightening? If you're sticking in there, good for you, because this, again, is deep. This is not like 5 quick self-improvement tips and SMART goals and drink more water. Like, this is peering into your soul of who you are. So now, the $1 million question, how do I fix it? We're gonna fix 30 years of shame-bound identity in 2 minutes, right? Awareness is always the first step because you can't fix anything you're not aware of. Starting with that, it's a focus on not more self-improvement, but more self-healing, self-acceptance. Everything that self-improvement's really good for, it's amazing. But if you're finding that there's an upper limit to it, to how much you can self-improve, and then you get to the top and you're like, I still don't feel like I have it all, or I'm enough, or why aren't I happy here? That's scary. Because the other side you've probably neglected. That was my case for a decade plus, was self-healing. And the goal here that I find really refreshing, and I hope you do too, the goal is not to fake a persona better. The goal is to come out of hiding, that this private self eventually merges into the public self. We have videos on self-healing on this channel, but a couple quickies here that I want you to go through today with as your intention. First, give up the need for approval for everyone, okay? Give up the need for approval from everyone. Because again, if your approval is based outside of yourself, you lose 100% of the time, because if they like you, you're gonna be insecure that they don't know the real you and you have to fake a persona. And if they don't like you, you're going to use that as evidence and the toxic shame cycle repeats. 2, prioritize hanging around people where you don't have to fake yourself. Again, this can be a partner, this can be your family, this can be close friends. That is the money right there. The more comfortable you can get with being you, the less you feel like you have to prove that you're not that or that you're someone else to others. 3, take out your journal, go to the coffee shop. You know our coffee shop exercises. Get a big coffee and journal on this question. This is one that I did, my coach gave me. What part of me is not okay? Okay, why is it not okay to be who I am? What am I buying into that I feel like I have to uphold? And for me, I've shared this in a previous video, it was the belief that I always had to be mind-blowing. I couldn't have a single off day, I couldn't ever be boring, I couldn't be average, I had to be mind-blowing. I had to be witty, I had to be charismatic, I had to be the best. Do you see anything wrong with that? How can you be mind-blowing 24/7? Even in my work, I'm like, every video has to be 1 out of 10. Not every video is gonna be 1 out of 10, that's okay. And in fact, focusing on like making a 1 out of 10 video robs a lot of what you have to share, because you're gonna, chances are, dumb it down or speak to the lowest common denominator, or I wouldn't make a video like this. And lastly, more ongoing, but therapy can help a lot. If you don't have someone who's a good mirror in your life, or you feel like this video really hits, seek out a therapist, you know, someone you can work through this with, someone that you feel comfortable with. And I would recommend CBT, Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. What do you think of that video? Huh? I told you it was deep. I wasn't messing around. Give it a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments if you want more chart videos like this. Thank you. Love you. See you in the next one. Stop settling, start living. Peace.